The Oscars have nominated 8 films for Best Picture. But should Christians watch? Our nun, professor and TV writer discuss the 8 nominees and which ones we think Christians should watch. Promising Young Woman.
I'm a nice guy. Are you?
Promising Young Woman is the story of a woman who seeks vengeance for a friend who was the victim of sexual violence at the hands of their med school classmates. Like the title, the film itself is promising, but pretty problematic.
This film is really interesting because it brings out the systemic problem of sexual assault, especially on college campuses. And yet, at the same time, this film brings out the problem that this vengeance consumes this young woman. Even though she saw her good friend die in this manner from sexual assault, it's just become her whole life. It kind of leaves you disturbed and frustrated and almost feeling like she won in the end.
Judas and the Black Messiah.
Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party.
I like movies that take me into a world and a culture that I don't know a lot about, and Judas and the Black Messiah does that. It's how Cutter talks about watching movies and TV as one way we can show hospitality to people who aren't like us. But Judas and the Black Messiah presents a history in a way that I don't think asked enough questions and didn't really dig deep enough into the mindset of its controversial real-life figures.
The Father.
You're living with your daughter at the moment?
Yes, until she goes to live in Paris.
No, Dad, why do you keep going on about Paris?
You told me.
In the film The Father, Anthony Hopkins pulls off a brilliant performance as an elderly gentleman who struggles with dementia, but who's reluctant to leave aside his independence, even when he realizes he needs help. His daughter is played by Olivia Colman, and she helps him along the way as this film weaves in and out of his perceived reality. You know, though dementia patients can be very trying to live with, I feel this film caves too quickly to the cultural convenience of discarding our elderly into care homes, when the familiar is what they long for the most.
The Trial of the Chicago 7.
We want to underscore again that we're coming to Chicago peacefully, but whether we're given permits or not, we're coming.
The Trial of the Chicago 7 is about the trial of the Chicago 7, a group of people who are at the center of the uprising at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Written and directed by Aaron Sorkin. It's a sharp, witty, and fast-paced film. I think Christians in particular will find the historical events really instructive and a model for those of us who might be committed to nonviolent forms of resistance.
You know, this film and Judas and the Black Messiah actually take place in the same time period, and there's even a crossover character that's mentioned in both of them. And what Cutter said about the nonviolence in Chicago 7, it's actually the violence in Judas and the Black Messiah that becomes a different side of history. What does it take to take up arms? I'm not sure Judas and the Black Messiah makes that case strong enough, but it's interesting to watch it in comparison to the Chicago 7.
Mank.
Mank? It's Orson Welles.
Of course it is.
I don't think this was a really strong year for movies. There were some good films nominated for Oscars. I'm just not sure all of them are Oscar worthy. But I think my choice from this list for my favorite movie of the year is Mank. It's about a writer, and I think writers should be the hero in every story. And it's kind of an homage to every film made in the 1940s. It looks and sounds like it was found in a film vault. The atmosphere totally drew me in. And I think just in terms of script, cinematography, costumes, sound, all the pieces that make up a movie, this is the one this year that I enjoyed watching the most.
Yeah, I totally disagree with you. It's brilliantly filmed, it's crafted well, it's incredible, but I thought it was a horribly boring story about Hollywood looking at itself.
You wanted this to be a movie about a nun because that's all that interests you. But it does address some spiritual themes about redemption and growth. But actually, interestingly, it's also a little bit about revenge.
To me, that was one of the more captivating parts of the movie. What it's like on the ground to write these stories, and the real people that might be either victimized by it or might make their careers off of it.
In the end, Sister Nancy, this is a movie about showing hospitality to writers, and that's why I think you should watch it.
It's okay, Dean.
You'll come around eventually.
Nomadland.
You are one of those lucky people that can travel anywhere.
Yes, ma'am, I know.
And they sometimes call you nomads.
Nomadland centers around Fern, a middle-aged woman, played by Frances McDormand, who, because of the financial collapse of her town, has to sell her house and sets off traveling and living out of her van. This film says a lot about life. In our intensely individualistic and materialistic urban living, I think this film can challenge us and challenge the audience to consider what's really important in life, what makes us happy, and how life is always better when we can share it with someone else.
You know, I wanted to like this movie more than I think I did and others did. I think it is a beautiful movie. It's very kind of contemplative. It's got real beauty, communion, fellowship to it. It almost goes out of its way to ignore God. I know she's broken and searching for meaning, maybe searching for communion, but I just thought it could have gone farther and actually gone a little bit deeper, even though I do think it is worth watching for sure.
I'm with you, Dean. I would describe it as she's not a nomad. She is a person that is haunted by the place that she was, basically lost. Her husband, her house, her community. The film wants to suggest that it's a sort of a reflection on what's valuable and everything, which it is. I wondered, as a character, whether or not she was able to realize what the film was trying to do.
Yeah, it's one thing to live a nomadic life. It's another thing to choose isolation. And I think this movie is really about a woman who sort of chooses isolation.
Sound of Metal.
You sound great.
Yeah, right.
What, you told me you weren't feeling it?
The Sound of Metal centers around a heavy metal drummer who loses his hearing, and his girlfriend and fellow band member convinces him to go to a rehab center for the deaf. While he's there, he struggles to find meaning in his deafness and in the silence. I think it's a challenging film that draws the audience to consider the sacramentality of silence, the grace in the moments of stillness, and the gift of living in the present. It's not a perfect film, but it's brilliantly crafted and a very clever, unique storyline that helps us to reflect on something we don't normally think about, the stillness and the silence in life.
I don't know if this is the best made movie of the year, but it was actually my favorite movie of the year. My mom taught deaf education, so I grew up around a lot of deaf people. It gets that community so right. It addresses the kingdom of God head on. This movie says, "Be still and know that I am God," and it almost says it straight out. And the final minute and a half of this movie is, I think, just awe-inspiring.
I think what's interesting about it is the character, he really wants to get his hearing back. And it's fascinating that the gentleman at the rehab center is saying that, everyone here doesn't see deafness as a handicap. And I think that was a really profound, and that's when he talks about the kingdom of God in the silence.
I think, Sister Nancy, you're absolutely right that one thing this movie does is push us to see any and all of our differently abled bodies as whole and not as lacking and in need of correction or in need of healing. What really comes about in terms of our ability to heal is to accept ourselves as whole already.
Minari.
Written and directed by Lee Isaac Chung, Minari is a story of a young Korean immigrant family who moves from California to Arkansas in order to pursue the elusive American dream. To me, it's a deeply American film, but it's also a profoundly Christian film. In my mind, it's actually everything a quote-unquote Christian film should be. Full disclosure, I know the filmmakers personally, and so I'm rooting for this. Even if it's not the best film of the year, I still want Minari to be the Best Picture winner.
I'm with you, Cutter. I think it should win. And why? Because it's funny, it's enjoyable. Yes, it has those Christian elements, but I think that just brought in for me the sacramentality of the present moment and the sacramentality of family. Even in the difficulties in all the tragedies they experience, they come together and they stay together and they remain together. And that's really a beautiful part of the film. And I think it was just so surprising. I just hope it wins.
This movie not only has Christian elements, it has Christian characters. There are a lot of scenes in the church. They talk about God at various times. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I feel like there must be some sort of flaw in me that I didn't find it as profound as everybody did. And I think in a normal year, it might not even be nominated. But that's not to say it doesn't deserve to be on the list. I'm just not sure that it rises to that level. But I actually, if it were to win the Oscar, I wouldn't go run screaming at Cutter or Sister Nancy. I just sort of, it just didn't quite do it for me. And I really was rooting for it during every scene.
Well, even though we disagree about the film, we are agreed that there is something wrong with you.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's good.
so that's good.
I accept that.
Until next time, I'm the nun, Sister Nancy Usselman.
I'm the professor, Dr. Cutter Calloway.
And I'm the writer, 2-time Academy Award seat filler, Dean Batali.